Hello, hello, and welcome to the Inner Edge, a conversation series exploring the inner architecture of founders and what it takes to build great companies from a grounded, clear place. Today, we will discuss the following topic.
Yeah, we want to speak about what is an education worth in times of AI? Maybe a question we all ask us on in a special occasion.
And I think it's a super interesting topic because ultimately, coming from my own experience, I was a dropout during my master's, and which was 11 years ago when nobody talked about AI, and AI wasn't a thing yet, and education was still very much static. The biggest innovation was that we had courses online, and the Technical University of Munich swapped basically the German content to English content. That was innovation 10 years ago. And still, I decided to drop out of my scholarships because I found purpose in building my company. And I think, yeah, for me back at the time, I was always reflecting on was the good or was the bad decision. I think it was the right decision because I felt like building a company is pure education, the realest education that you can get.
Yeah, and I think what is interesting with that is that it's also the most, so to say, up to time education, right? Because you are in the real world, you're building in the reality. So, meaning like you never faced with issues or topics which are not relevant today. So, it's probably the way to get the most up to time education as well, right?
That 100% true. And I think the big question is because if the real world moves that fast as it does right now, right, where every every month everything is like every tool set change, and I think the way how people work is changing so dramatically. The big question for our education system, it doesn't matter if it's in Europe or the US, but primarily in Europe, is like how will that change? Because if it doesn't change, right, can I even in high school or even in like in lower school, can I even like continue the way that we're teaching like children today to do teaching our young adults today? Because if I look at the movement of the world and the education system, I think right now my decision would be clearly to not study and just build a company. And I mean, you have had a very personal experience recently in your family about that, and maybe you can share your thoughts and the personal story behind it.
Yeah, I must say, I think I have more touch points than I think because I'm invested in No Unity, as you know, right? And that's an AI math tutor for children. And actually, my daughter with 13 is exactly their target group. And I just got interviewed by Brand 1. It's a big German magazine about the future of education, and I told them that I do feel my vision of investing in Unity was not to I mean deliver only the AI tutor. I do think what they're doing amazing is that they're attracting the kids, right? The kids like to use the tool to learn, and not in a way of like, oh, we're just giving the answers back of the exam I just need to do right now, or the homework, but actually also giving them help how to learn to give the best better answers themselves. And so that's the idea today. But I do feel if you get the students themselves actively, so to say, and positively engaged in these tools, this could also be a future way for school to improve and to be more attractive for kids. Because in the end of the day, school only works, or educational learning only works when it's attractive, for the kids and also for us. And I mean, I did an MBA and just asked myself, would I do an MBA again? And I think there are reasons for it, but also reasons against it. And I mean, as you just said, and I have the example in my family. I think you referred to Lucas, my son, and he really enjoyed his studies, which is a very good university, and he was doing well. And I was extremely impressed with him that he came to me and said, "Mama, it's fun, yeah, and it's a lot of party, and it's still good learning, but it's still far from reality, you know?" I mean, and he could judge that because he obviously has a mother who doesn't stop to basically be involved in founding companies and only hanging with founders. So he had the comparison, and I think many kids don't. So for them, university could be also a place where they meet and get inspired, maybe like you, and to found companies and to go into entrepreneurship. So it doesn't have to be exactly like in his case, but he clearly knew that he would probably have more inspiration and more opportunity to learn, like you as well, to not continue studying. And I said to him, like, okay, try it, because it's also a level of self-discipline, and now suddenly you're alone, nobody can tell you what to do, you need to figure it out yourself. And he did very well, but it was not clear when he dropped if that would be a good path. So I told him, take some time out, keep your path open to return, and then judge after a certain period of time if you're successful in what you're doing, and then you can continue. Yeah, so I think it depends a little bit, like, why do you as well study? Do you only study for the content, or maybe also for the inspiration and the community you're finding there?
Or you just don't, or you're in the situation where you just don't know what to do in your life, and then it's a good bridge because it's clearly an explorational aspect. I think this is just I think the what you pointed out in terms of what education systems should focus on right now is really about, okay, how can I foster connection, how can I foster community, and then also how can you foster the real world learning by understanding and learning the tools, and learning in a way where it's different than it was like we did, where we had to. I don't know if you had to do that, but I had to program on a white piece of paper during my exams, writing a code in R. I think nobody even knows what computer language that is, but I think this is kind of I think it's the change of subject. But all in all, I think there's also another topic which was quite which I find quite strange, to be honest, in the European tech scene, which is basically that if you look at the US and the Europeans, I mean the big majority of tech founders in Europe hold at least a master degree. Um, and so you see also a certain pushback in Europe for early dropouts because it's seemed to be a signal of low commitment, um, which I think I don't believe that. I don't know what's your opinion also from an investor perspective. If you see a founder who has a master degree or PhD and or not, does it really have an influence for you or not?
I mean, I'm definitely not like a checklist investor where I would say, like, you have to do this and then do that, and then it's fine. It's really always depending. And I think, for example, it's much more important if someone maybe played some sports or did some sports in a team, or in a discipline, and achieved something there. I think it shows much more of what you learned and what you can do, maybe also accomplish in a team, than in a degree. And obviously, a degree can also be so different, right? I mean, like, the quality of degrees over the world is so non-comparable today, that I would say it doesn't have that much value. But I think you are completely right that in Europe there's still the notion, oh, you need to have that. If you drop out, that's not so cool. Um, where I feel, and I mean, actually, I'm telling my kids, the later you do something, right, the less, so to say, 10,000 hours you have to get really good at it. So, meaning, I would probably encourage people to start as early as possible, but maybe I'm a little bit biased because I did it myself. But so, I mean, it's very subjective view, of course. However, I still believe like you need to have your 10,000 hours in everything you do, and the earlier you get that in, the better, or the more beneficial it will be for you. So I would probably advise always start early. Yeah, but whatever you
Start
want to
early,
do.
but it's never too late because today is the earliest day that you still have.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
100%. This is so true, because in the end of the day, you need 10,000 hours. So, I mean, even if you start, let's say, in the middle of your life, like me, I would say, I mean, I can still work like 20, 30 years, and if I put my 10,000 hours in it, no problem. But I also do feel that there are obviously times in life where it might be also easier, and you, I mean, for example, I do feel like it's such a benefit when founders start in the early 20s to found companies, because obviously their risk judgment is much more flexible, let's say, than when you start later. I mean, when you have kids, and you have an apartment and to pay, and maybe not rich parents, I mean, I do understand that people think twice. So for yourself, I would say it's better if you choose the right phase in life, right?
yeah, that's completely true, and I think it's also a matter of energy, right? If you go into something with a little bit more being naive, then you're learn, and then you're just. I mean, it's a learning cycle, and the learning cycle, but you can't you're basically trained on not stopping. Right, versus if you have other commitments in life, you have a you try to train yourself on stopping, or if you have something. And I'm just going through this experience right now, where it's like, if you're in the market change, everything changed, and I feel like I'm back in that Cornux early days, where I have to read, like, now I'm listening to every podcast around P2C AI subscription, and how to optimize retention, and what is now. And then, and also there, the market changed in the last. Even if you knew something 2 years ago, it is not relevant anymore, because it's like, I mean, token costs and everything. It just changed. I think, in the industry change, and I think it doesn't matter in which segment um, you're founding a company. The As education is kind of changing through AI, hopefully soon, a lot. The world will also, every market is currently changing. So I think, if you're not coming in from an educational learning perspective, you should just not do it, because it is. And I think this is like, it's doing a startup is intense, and this was always true. But I think the intensity and complexity got increased, not reduced. This is at least from how I feel, because everything is just so much more
Yes.
dynamic. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's 100% right. But I also do believe that because the complexity grows, because it's going so fast, the value of your network, especially the network which has great depth, meaning that where you can really rely, where you can really learn from, that this actually network gets even more or valuable than before, right? Because before, so to say, you had the balancing between, yeah, I need to just know a little bit, and I need to know some people, and then I need to be active, and then I'm gonna be successful, right? So I mean, basically, the average was easier to succeed with. Now I think, as things become more extreme, so to say, you also have to rely on more deep support and conversations and network. And I do feel that, let's say, education, or for example, doing your MBA, or um, actually even, I mean, communities and family does have an even bigger value than today, than before, because it is, yeah, you know, when the average, let's say, increases so much, then like these values play a bigger decision factor. And I mean, for that, education could be good. I mean, you're an excellent networker, as I know, and your network is amazing, and people really love you. And I do think that's a strength which not everyone has naturally, but it's extremely important and needed to succeed. So yeah, I think it really depends also what set of resources do you bring to the table, and education could be for that reason a good way to improve your network. If you don't have it, if you have it, for example, in your family already, why should you do it then? Then you just need to build, right? Um, but yeah, I think it depends really also on what's your reason and what's your motivation to go into education as well.
Yeah. I think that's a super relevant point because back at the time when you did your Stanford MBA or your Harvard MBA, people
Yeah,
said basically you pay for the network you get. And I think what you
exactly.
just said is like it's so much more true. Or it just became even more true than it was in the
Yes.
past. I would also say the human connection in a world of AI is kind of so important on so many levels. I mean, because otherwise you kind of can go in doom loops with your Claude about how to optimize your some strategy, and sometimes the real a very unbiased communication and conversation with a friend kind of heals and saves you hours and days. But I think it's very true what you said. It's like the which superpower do you bring to the table? I just don't believe that expert kind of knowledge, like like 10 years ago when you had subject matter expertise, and you could talk about a certain technology and then nobody understands you and you were cool. I think that just doesn't count because people will basically move through that in a matter of hours, but because knowledge is so broadly available. I think that's kind of, I think, a shift.
Yeah. I mean, that inspires me to a really interesting thought. I have been
Go on.
discussing and, yeah, thinking a lot about, which is that I do feel what is, let's say, what is the absolutely critical component for taking good decisions is critical thinking. I mean, if you're not able to assess in a situation or a topic, um, in, let's say, with critical questions, then I would bet that it's very, very hard to get yourself to a point where you say like, hey, I go for it, or I don't. And I do feel that especially entrepreneurs, the main minimum thing they need to know is how to take quick decisions. And obviously, I mean, Warren Buffett, I just looked at a video from, or interview with him, and it was amazing because he said, I mean, obviously, yeah, from 100 decisions, I mean, not exactly he said that, but translated, from 100 decisions, he did, so to say, 30 or 40 wrong. But it mattered, that he could do 60 right, because if the majority of his decisions were right, he's in the end of the day making money, right? And I think that's actually really important to understand. Okay, how do I make quick decisions and get the majority of my decisions right? And I do feel that this is a critical thinking skill, which might be something which is I mean, is the resources schools, education, and even parents need to teach as the most important, because obviously if I mean, even as an investor, I can go now and say like, please find me all information about company XYZ. We discussed that. And then your AI model will give you back, okay, the company is doing this and that, and it looks as if the founder looks like this and this. Yeah. And actually the AI model will say like, okay, it's a good or bad company. Is that then the base, you want to make your decision on? If that's it, I would say you have a problem as an investor, because that means that everyone else has exactly the same uh, level of information, meaning that your job is actually not needed anymore because AI can decide for you if you invest or not. Meaning that you have to now bring something to the table which AI obviously cannot judge. And I think there is a lot which is not yet able to be judged by AI, meaning that, okay, there are a lot of decision factors making investment, in my case, for example, now being a good one or not. And the question is, am I skilled enough to ask the right questions? I mean, either AI or the people, the DD, as we call it, the due diligence people we are talking to, or maybe market experts. Can we actually create, with our critical thinking, a different picture about a company and decide on different matters? And I think decision making has always, let's say, fascinated me. There's this amazing book um, from Dan Ariely. It's called Rational Irrational or something, or Irrational Rational or something like that. In German, Denken hilft viel, nützt aber nichts, which is also funny. It means like you thinking helps, but doesn't help in the end of the day. And it shows basically how much we are locked in our own biases when we're taking decisions. It's basically a book just about biases and decision making. And I think it's fascinating to read it because it opens your eyes for how important, yeah, critical thinking and critical decision making is for you. And I do think if schools and education focuses on that, that's nothing AI can give you, then it's worth an education, I would say. At least I see that in my juniors I work with, that it's something sometimes easier for them to give the AI answer than really thinking about it critical themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a super relevant point because it comes down to education, right? If you have AI and you have basically and you see the development in the last 6 months, and then you can basically do a wild prediction on where this goes, then it's basically all about what questions do you ask, right? And then because if you let the AI then do the questions for you, that means you're basically there is no reason why I should why there shouldn't be an agent, because the agent is so much better, so much faster than you if you don't bring in that other aspect, that human aspect, right? And I think this is so much. I just had a lot of recent conversations with tier one US VCs, and I think the diligence they put on the human being in that call, I think, and the presence it's I think their whole assumption is basically the only way we provide value is basically understanding that human being, because everything about the market and everything, I mean, we need, like, they need to know beforehand, and then it's all about understanding in depth that human being that wants to drive that idea to something, right? Because everything else is basically the job on their side. um, and I think this is it's less about um, the like it's less about the numbers or the thoughts. It's more about really understanding how does this person think, and I think that's super interesting. And I also believe, I mean, the question, and I would throw that over to you. Do you believe that analysts and like, do you believe that single GP funds will be much more the future? Because I mean, if you build a great agentic setup, most of the analyst work will be and sourcing work and can be automated. What's your thoughts about that?
I mean, clearly, the access to the information where you had before to put a Notion thing together, or an Excel list of like, okay, this is our deals, that's how they compare and everything. Now it's just done automatic with our Claude agent. it's pretty crazy and impressive, right? So yes, I would say I'm, for example, much more independent from the work of my juniors to get to the investment to a point. But still, I would say my job is still pretty big because I mean, like finally you have the numbers, you still can compare them with companies at the same stage, and then you look at it, and then in the end of the day, you ask yourself the question, like you just said, like, will the person who's leading the company take this company now on a, let's say, even more positive trajectory, or is it more going maybe down or stagnating? Like, I mean, in the end of the day, it's a bet on the founder, and a bet, I mean, at least in the stages we are at, meaning like in early stage, right? I think in later stages, it's more a numbers game. So, I mean, we have to be careful with that. However, and I would say if juniors bring the ability and to develop a feeling for that, and also are curious to apply critical thinking to that, and find and spend maybe, I mean, more time on in these areas where they save time now in the areas where they spent before time with the Excel sheet. I would say you can still do a great career, even in those times. But obviously, you need to be smart and understand. Yes, I can be replaced with AI. So, what's my role now, right? Um, and I do think this is a question and a task we all have now in all positions, to ask ourselves, if AI can do XYZ, what is then my role? And that's actually a normal, I would say, adjustment of evolution that we always have to also reinvent ourselves. And so it's a
Mm.
logical consequence.
So basically, I just came up with that thought of everybody goes through a founder journey, because a founder journey is always redefining your role after every major milestone of growth. Like back in time, it was team fundraising. You redefine your role. It doesn't matter which title you had, like a CTO, or like a CTO of a founding CTO or founding CEO is very different from seed to A to B to C to pre-IPO and stuff. So I think now you needed to always adapt, like every quarter, every half a year, your complete role and your definition of yourself, and kind of relearning. And I think now AI forces that basically into every industry, right? And I think this is kind of the and this is why I can understand it puts a lot of people in under pressure of, okay, what does it mean for me? But I think this is what you said is so important, is like bring the human aspect. What is really, where can I provide value, and coming from a place of opportunity, not from a place of trying to be defensive. Because I think if you try to be defensive in resistance and want to hold on, no, it's better if I do that. I think that is just a doom path, a path that will lead you to nowhere.
Yeah, I 100% agree that I mean, always reinvent yourself in on all levels, is a universal truth. And we are all, so to say, mini founders, and some people feel it maybe or feel the consequences quicker than others. I mean, there for sure industries which take longer to impact, but in the end of the day, it's the same game for everyone. And I do feel that if we, I mean, it's even in research of longevity, it's proven that only if we are adjusting and keep learning, and also keep being curious about life, I mean, then our body thinks it's worth to support us. So I think it's kind of like even nature's law, and that we in a positive way have to learn and have to be curious, if we wanna exist, it's actually probably quite the question of existence
Mm,
in a
I love that.
in a natural way.
No, no, I love that, and I think this is but it's outside the comfort zone. I think every real growth is outside the comfort zone, and I think this is kind of the big um the big question of how are you like in every revolution, every historical technology revolution is, and this is also probably a question for the education systems, how quickly will they adapt? Because as you said, if you're thinking from it just from a pure, you're a citizen, you're the consumer of something. So you're the student is a consumer of education, and we have the beautiful thing in Germany that our education is primarily for free, which is a beautiful thing. But that means the user gets it for free, but he still has to like it, right? And this is the thing that you said before, and just coming from that place on how can you provide value that's and how can you make that more fun, and how can you make that more like yeah that enjoyable. I think that's kind of the big question, and I think it's a big question for the government, and usually in the past governments haven't been very quick in adopting. So I think that's basically a big challenge for every school, every university. And I think I'm personally absolutely not a fan anymore of games and the game industry, but I think the game industry has found so many techniques to make things enjoyable. And I think if you make learning and educational and gamify that, I think that's probably that's probably the only way it will work. And I mean, your portfolio company with Ben shows that. I mean, I think they make it enjoyable.
Yes, but I think like I I think maybe there's like two types of learnings. One is like allowing people to have access to content which is really relevant for them, right? And I think, for example, No Unity is a really good example for that. And I I do think that the biggest challenge of today's school system in any on every stage is that maybe the content is not that relevant anymore for people, right? But I think that's a little bit different from the topic we just discussed before, and you said that, which I think I like a lot, is that most of the real learning in life happens really outside of the comfort zone. And I think that's also some like a natural law we should not underestimate, because I think humans, or actually the world, I mean, evolution is only forcing you to change when the pain is so big that you have to, right? I mean, that's how we are built, and I think it's not because we are bad species, but it's more. I think it's a law of like you want to. It's a law of energy expenditure. So obviously, we are optimizing always to give as little energy as possible into things, which is in purpose a really good way of nature to keep you warm, right? So there's a logic behind it. But on the other hand, then it means that we avoid often maybe learnings which are absolutely needed, um, because we do feel, yeah, I don't want to waste my energy on it, or it feels uncomfortable. But only those things who are uncomfortable and who will burn a lot of energy and really make a change. Um, and I do see, and I mean, here maybe we have the loop back to the founders, that a lot of founders, whether they have done their education or not, but who had times in their lives where they made the experience of being uncomfortable to maybe not being in the best situation, that they had it easier to grow and to adapt, because, so to say, they were not that comfortable, right? And I mean, I it's very bad to see, but can see that also with my kids. If I make it easy for my kids and say, here's all the world, the money of the world, and here's your apartment, here's your car, yeah, why should they actually then work, right? I mean, it would be even stupid, so to say, from them to do it. So meaning that I think um, l- um, you need to create a necessity of change, and that will not be done by the best environments. This will be more done where there's maybe scarce resources or experiences you don't like, right? So yeah, that's a I think that's just a very valuable point. We need to be pushed
And I think
to
I
to
think it's
change.
it's a very valuable, and I think it's a beautiful endpoint to what is education worth in the world of AI. And if you like that series, follow us on the different channels, like us, and we see you very soon.